welcome to our webinar on the contraception database and sort of how to enter your data and what we do with your data as well. I'm Ronnie Cowell, I'm the Programme Coordinator for the EAZA Reproductive Management Group, and I'm also joined by Sue Walker, our Chair, Yedra Feltra, our Vice Chair, and Ty Strike, one of our working group advisors. I appreciate we have a mixed audience here, so we wanted to start by just doing a brief introduction on contraceptive methods and terminology, which should hopefully to give you a clue as to why we ask certain questions that we do on our online survey. Then I wanted to do a sort of demo on actually using the EAZA website and how to enter data and sort of transfer animals, end bouts, edit data, etc. And then also I quickly wanted to touch upon how we use the data that you provide us to create our contraceptive guidelines and then to support you in turn when you're contracepting your animals. So to start with methods of contraception, there are different ways that you can manage reproduction within your population. So quite simply, you can just separate the sexes, as well as in some species there's social suppression of reproduction, chemical contraception, which tends to be reversible and temporary. And then also there's surgical sterilization, which is permanent. And sort of in this next section, we'll just focus on reversible contraception. When we're looking at chemical contraception, there's three main different groups of contraceptives that you can use. There's synthetic steroid hormones, GnRH agonists, and then also immunocontraception. So starting with synthetic steroid hormones, these can only be, or these are primarily used in females to limit reproduction. And you have progestogens and then progesterone and estrogen combinations. So for progestogens, these work by interfering with fertilization. So they thicken cervical mucus, they interrupt gamete transport and disrupt implantation. Then also they inhibit ovulation. The different types of progestogens that you can have are oral progestogens that require daily administration. So these are things like birth control pills, both the combination pill or progesterone-only pills. Altrenogest, also known as by its commercial name Regimate, which is an oral solution. And then clomidinone acetate as well, so that's anti-fertile tablets, they're just pills as well. You have injectable contraceptives as well, so these are things like Depo-Provera, medroxyprogesterone acetate, which lasts approximately 2 to 3 months, but this is dose dependent, so can last between 2 weeks and 2 years as well, depending on what dose you're using. And then also delvosterone, which is prologestone. We also have different implants that you can add to the contraception database. So these last between 2 to 3 years normally. There is MGA, so melengestrol acetate. This would probably only commonly be added if you're adding historic data, as MGA is no longer available for use in Europe. Implanon and Nexplanon, so these are tonogestrol implants. And then also Jadel, so levonorgestrel implants. If you are looking to breed from your animals that you've implanted with these contraceptives, we'd always advise removing the implants as well when they're given a breeding recommendation. And so then you should place the implants as well in locations with thinner skin, such as in the inner arm, inner thigh, or in the umbilical region. And generally, use of progestogens in carnivores is contraindicated due to potential reproductive pathologies that can develop. Then also we have GnRH agonists. So these are effective in both males and females. And the two main types of GnRH agonists that are used are either deslorelin acetate implants or Lupron depot injections. So GnRH agonists work by suppressing the function of the pituitary gonadal axis, both in males and females. So it can be used in both sexes. Initially, you do get a stimulation period of about 3 weeks where there is upregulation of testosterone and spermatogenesis and also estrus of ovulation. So to manage this stimulation period, we encourage, well, you can either separate the sexes for 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the facilities that you have and the species that you're contracepting. This is discouraged in carnivores generally and also contraindicated in canids, again, due to risks of developing reproductive pathologies. And You can manage this initial stimulation period in females only, and this is by giving them supplemented megestrol acetate tablets. So these are known by either Overid, Megace, or Megestrol, and you have to apply this daily, 7 days before you implant your females, and for 8 days after. You can, in some cases, also use other oral progestogens, such as Ultrenagest, so that was Regumate. But under no circumstances should Depo-Provera be used to manage the stimulation phase, as it could inhibit the efficacy of the GnRH agonists. So with the GnRH agonists that you can use in the contraception database, we have primarily desloratadine acetate implants. These have 2 different formulations. So you have your 4.7 milligram formulation, which lasts for a minimum duration of 6 months, but this can depend on the species that you're contracepting and also on the individual. And then you have the 9.4 milligram formulation as well, which should last a minimum duration of 12 months. Again, like with progestogen implants, we would always advise that you remove the implants for reversals. And then also there's a leuprolide acetate, which is an injection. This is available in various different formulations, lasting between 1 to 6 months, and dosing will depend as well on the species that you're contracepting. GnRH agonists generally have not been found to be effective in either male marsupials or male ungulates, so we generally wouldn't recommend that they're used in those species. We then also have immunocontraceptives. So the first one is PZP vaccine, so that's porcine zona pellucida. And the zona pellucida is a layer of glycoproteins surrounding the oocyte, and this is what the sperm needs to bind to in order to fertilize the egg. The PZP vaccine is only effective in females because the zona pellucida is only found on an oocyte, and it causes the body to produce antibodies preventing the fertilization of the egg. This product is not used in the UK, it can't be imported for use in the UK, and it can only be imported from the USA, from the Science and Conservation Centre in the States. And then also we have GnRH vaccines. So GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone. This triggers the excretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone in males and females. So in males, this would cause the development of sperm and the secretion of testosterone. And in females, you'd have the growth, maturation, and ovulation of follicles and the secretion of estrogen and progesterone. The way the vaccine works is when you inject the vaccine, it triggers the production of antibodies against GnRH in your individual. This then blocks GnRH receptors in the pituitary and neutralizes any endogenous GnRH. So this stops the secretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, then preventing the development of sperm and also the growth and maturation of oocytes. There are a couple of different GnRH vaccines that are commercially available and that are used in Europe. So first we have Improvac. This is 150 nanograms per milliliter in Europe of active protein conjugate. And in African countries, the same product has 200 nanograms of protein conjugate per milliliter. So it's really important that when you're adding information about Improvac to the database, that you're providing us with the amount of protein conjugate rather than the milliliters used in each injection. Improvest tends to only be used in the US, and that has 200 nanograms of protein conjugate per milliliter. As I said, enter the dose as protein, not milliliters, because that helps us know what dose was actually used in that animal. And when you first inject or contracept an animal with GnRH vaccines, you'll need a primary vaccination course of 2 injections around 35 days apart before you see any downregulation of the reproductive system. The duration of boosters thereafter do vary a lot depending on the species that you're contracepting and also on the individual, but usually it's around 3 to 6 months initially. I then just wanted to touch upon different contraceptive failures that we experience and how we use the data to then sort of define what type of failure there was in, with the contraceptive. So you have your initial product failures, and that's just where the product has failed to contracept your individual. So you've used an adequate dose, you've separated your animals for the correct amount of time, or you've suppressed the simulation phase with deslorelin, but the contraceptive just has failed to work in that individual. We then also have institutional failures. So this tends to be where protocols were incorrectly followed, so incorrect doses were used, products that aren't known to be effective in certain species were used. For example, if you use deslorelin in a male ungulate, and then that individual went on to sire offspring, that would be seen as an institutional failure rather than a product failure. And also if damage to the product has occurred due to incorrect storage, so if it was stored too hot or too cold, or if there was too high humidity. We then also have animal failures. So that's just when an animal fails to take a contraceptive correctly. So for example, with birth control pills, if a primate, for example, just doesn't actually consume the contraceptive, or if they remove an implant as well. We then also classify reversals differently depending on the data that we have available. So we initially have behavioral reversals. So we're looking for the resumption of estrus or breeding behaviors in males and females. Also looking at physiological reversals. So this is if there's been endocrine monitoring carried out, or sperm evaluations, any ultrasounds as well. So we're looking at the resumption of female cycling, or males that are producing testosterone again, or sperm. And then lastly, we have full reversals. So this is conception. And so we look at all abortions, miscarriages, stillbirths, and live births as full reversals, although we do then go on to classify whether it was a live or a stillbirth with the offspring. So I will now try and go onto our website to sort of guide you through the website and how to add data. Just change the screen that I'm sharing. Right, so I hope you can all see my screen. Can someone just type in the chat box if you can see the EAZA website on your screen?
Yes, you can see it, Rani.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Just checking. So I hope you're all familiar with this website. I apologize that we haven't updated this website with our new branding as the EAZA Reproductive Management Center, but given the current situation, our web development team can't update this at the moment. So on our website, this sort of image that you can see is freely available for everyone, regardless of whether you've registered with us or not. So on our website, we have some resources that we think are useful. So for example, we have information on pathology protocols, why you would look at pathology and reproductive tract pathologies in contracepted animals. We also have pathology protocols available to help you if you do have reproductive tracts and you'd like to send them off for evaluation. We also have a page on monitoring efficacy. So this was looking at endocrine monitoring, also behavioral monitoring, looking at the efficacy of contraception. We have several different labs advertised on our website that you can contact if you are looking to monitor the reproductive hormones of your contracepted animals, and we can also help you develop any monitoring protocols if that's useful for you. We also have several guidelines available. So I apologize, it's a double click. It's a bit of a messy website at the moment. So if you click the guidelines page, and then please find our completed current guidelines here, we have a full page of different taxon overviews of contraception. So we don't have species-specific contraceptive guidelines available currently on this website, but we will be updating it to upload all of the guidelines that we've made for different best practice guidelines and different program coordinators. We also have general information available about all different contraceptive products that are commonly used, as well as different monitoring protocols and short contraceptive surveys that you can send us if you're replacing contraception or if there's been a failure, just to fill in that key information for us. We also have a reproductive health checklist. So this is when you have animals that should be breeding but aren't breeding. This checklist is a guide to kind of narrow down what the potential challenges can be and what the potential point of reproductive failure is within that breeding pair. We then also have several resources available. So we have research priorities. So basically what we find as a group are key reproductive research issues within the community and where we would like to focus our research on. We have a full statement on data ownership and how we use your data, as well as a user manual for more information on how to use the website and how to add data. We also then have a reference list, which looks at basically reproductive biology in a wide range of species, also looking at contraception and different research looking at contraception in species. We do update this sort of every couple of years, but otherwise you can also find updated research on our Twitter account, which I'll send you the link to later. We also have some information on different gestation lengths and ovulation in different species, as the type of ovulation in your animal can affect which type of contraceptive you can use and how to manage that. So to actually enter data onto the website, you first need to be registered with us. So you need to have an active account. I think most of you that are sort of attending this webinar should already be registered, but if you don't have a user name yet, you just click register at the top of the page. All of these red fields need to be completed in order to progress to the next stage. If you haven't registered, type in your institution. So for example, Chester, if you work at Chester, and then type in your details. If your institution is not on this list, click the green "My institution isn't on the list," and then type in the address and different details for your institution. And we'll create a new institutional profile for you then as well. If you have registered, just press login and log into the website. So again, your initial overview is very similar to what you see if you just go onto the EAZA website without logging in. We have different fields for where you have your animal data. So the first main tab is the My Animals tab. And also I just want to say that all of this data is fake data. It's a fake institution that we made up, so there's no issues around that. The My Animals tab has information about any animal that has ever been contracepted or added to your institution. So this doesn't mean that they're currently active. These could be deceased animals as well. It just has a whole list of every animal ever added. We then have animals currently on contraception. So these are animals that have a currently active bout of contraception. So it's not gone past the review date, and it's not gone past, it doesn't have any completion information added. You can also export all of this data to an Excel file by clicking the export to CSV. We then also have the bouts requiring an update tab. So these are bouts where the bout has been completed. So we have information about the end of the contraceptive record. However, we need some extra information before we can sort of close the record. So this could mean that your animal has deceased and we're awaiting some pathology or post-mortem information, or your animal has been allowed to breed. And we are looking either to find out whether they have successfully reversed or for another update, whether they're contracepted again. When you look at different contraceptive profiles as well, let me go into this female. So this is the profile for an animal that you have on your institutional profile. So we'll have information about the species, the name, ID, birth dates, etc. You can add GAN number and studbook numbers as well that can help you track your female. And these lines at the bottom are what your bouts look like. So this white bout means it's currently inactive. So it's a completed bout as it has an end date. And if you click into the record, you can't edit any fields because it's completed. So you'll have this red stop sign if you try to amend any of the data. You can go back to her profile though, and then you see this green belt, which generally means it's open and editable. So you can go in and change any of the details that you need to. Because in this case, it's because the bout is still active. So we're looking for you to add your completion information. But even if you have completion information and we're looking for more updates, so for example, for reversals, you can then also edit those records. Generally, when you add a contraceptive bout, it will take around 24 hours for it to become green if it's editable, or for it to be locked, as I check everything that's been added in the past 24 hours every morning. So just have some patience with me, please. Right, let's try and add a new animal. So that's the 4th tab at the top. Again, the red fields are required information that will allow you to save a new animal into your institution. You can search for different species, either using the Latin name or the common name. So in this case, let's add a jaguar. Again, you can add all the stud book numbers, which help us trace your animal. We'd really ask you to add in a GAN number as well, if possible. So that allows us to look up more easily if they have reversed, potentially if it's an older bout, or to ask for any follow-up information. We also ask that you add in a birth date, as the age of contraception could influence reversibility, for example, and it can allow us to see whether maybe they should have already had offspring at that age. So in this case, we'll add in a 2-year-old jaguar. You can either type in the birth date, or you can use the little calendar function and change the dates and the months that way. We'll add that she is a female. For this field, looking at tag sharing, for now it's a required field, but we will be removing it just as soon as we can get our IT developer back onto this. So for now, it's just arbitrary what you fill in, and we will be removing this field. And then we'll add in just a house name so that you can find her easily as well. Once you've pressed save, you'll go automatically to their profile page. So we'll add in a contraceptive bout for Sammy the jaguar. We want to look at what weight your animal is, because that allows us to identify whether the correct dosing has also been used in your animal. So she is a 60 kilo female. I'd also encourage you to always use a decimal place if you're adding in doses or weights, as the website won't recognize if you have a comma separating the kilos and the grams. You can then say whether it's an actual or estimated date when the weight was taken. We ask whether the animal has a previous reproductive history, as that also clues us in as to whether they were fertile before they were contracepted. So in this case, we can say yes, and that she gave birth on the 1st of April, 2020. We then ask for when you first contracepted your animal. So we can say that she was contracepted at the beginning of May. And for contraception, the review date automatically sets as a year from the date that you added the contraceptive bout. So it says the 1st of June, 2021. This is just a date that you can use so that you know when you need to either talk to your curators to check with the breeding program coordinator whether they have another breeding recommendation, or whether contraception needs to be removed. So you can change this to whatever is useful for you, depending on how your institution works. With this female, we will contracept her with an implant. So we'll give her a deslorelan implant. And you can select different contraceptives according to the list. And this list of contraceptive products will vary depending on whether you have an implant or an oral contraceptive, or whether it's surgical. We then ask about distributors and manufacturers, just to understand more about how you acquired the different products. This isn't necessarily key information, but it's useful information to input if you can. We then also look at how you implanted the animals, because this also gives us more information about how easy removals of implants, for example, were. So in this case, we implanted her subcutaneously in the left inner thigh, and we gave her 2 9.4 milligram implants. Now, if you recall from my presentation earlier, just giving the overview of contraceptive products, with deslorelin, you can manage the stimulation phase in females. And you can add this information really, really easily to the database just by saying that a second supplemental contraceptive method was used. So you change that to yes, and then just press save bout details. And once sort of the main deslorelin, the parent deslorelin bout is saved, you can then add any information about supplemental contraception. So this female was contracepted on the 1st of May. So we would want to give her oral megestrol acetate for 7 days before and 8 days after she was contracepted. So from the 1st of May, we would go to the 24th of April, and the end date would be the 9th even. The 9th of May. You can then say what type of contraceptive you gave her and what the active ingredient was. So again, this would be megestrol acetate. And then you can add in what dose was given. So we normally recommend between 2 to 5 milligrams per kilo body weight. She was 60 kilos, so it would be 120 milligrams. And you can convert quite easily as well between grams, milligrams, nanograms, and kilograms with dosing. Once you've saved the bout, you'll see she has that parent deslorelin bout. It's currently white because I haven't updated the classification. I haven't said that it's active on the sort of back end of the website. And then also you'll have this blue bout. So blue bouts are the supplemental contraception that you're using. If you are adding, instead of adding supplemental contraception, you are separating individuals, you can also say that at the bottom here quite easily. Once you have created a bout as well, you will see that you have this add and edit comments box. This is just an easy way for you to communicate with us if there is any extra information that you'd like us to know. So for example, if you are contracepting your animal for a medical reason, you can add in information about what medical issues that animal has at that moment. As well, if maybe a full dose wasn't able, you couldn't inject a full dose, for example, if you're darting an animal, it might have fallen out. You can add that here as well, so we know that there wasn't a full dose administered. So we have several different pages of questions that we ask as well for each contracepted animal. We have a follow-up page, which asks about different behavioral changes and also physical changes during the contraceptive period. So this is particularly interesting because if we're looking at, for example, contracepting an animal for aggression or behavioral management, we want to know whether it was effective, whether there was an increase or decrease in aggression, whether there were any other social issues or social changes in that group. So this is your opportunity to add all of that information. We also ask for information about when that animal was given mate access. So this is also, this has a dual function. So first to know about how long they were separated for, if you're managing the stimulation period or you're waiting for the contraceptive to be effective. But also if you are allowing an animal to breed again, but maybe you remove the implant and then you don't actually place an individual with a breeding partner for another year, we would count breeding or the start of the breeding opportunity from when they're actually placed with a breeding partner rather than from when an implant or a contraceptive has been removed. For most of these questions, you have a drop-down option of yes, no, or unknown, but then we do have comments boxes for you to add in more information, and you have unlimited amount of text that you can add to this as well. So if something isn't necessarily covered on this list, you can add extra information as well. We also have a user level setup where they would only have access to this page. So for example, if you have animal care staff who would like to add information about different behaviors, we can arrange it so that when they get to the animal profile page, they only see the box for the follow-up information. If you would like to set up a user at that level, please let me know and we can sort that out. Then also to add completion information. So this is when you're either transferring an animal to a new institution or when you're ending the contraceptive bout. So you have the option to just transfer an animal. Again, to find the zoo, you would search for the zoo as you did when you registered. So in this case, we're transferring this animal to Ashby Acres. And then you can set a transfer date and whether or not the bout is ongoing or not. So if you are removing the implant, you say no in this case, and then say why you're removing the implant. So maybe they have a breeding recommendation in that new institution. You can also transfer an ongoing bout, and this will then automatically transfer this animal's information to that new zoo. Again, it will take about 24 hours for the transfer to go through, just so I can check it all up on ZIMS to make sure that that new institution should be seeing that data. And once you've transferred an animal, you can no longer edit that data, and you cannot see any new contraception has been added. You can only see the contraception that was added at your institution. But if, for example, we are not transferring an animal, and they're staying at your institution, but for Sammy, she now has a breeding recommendation. So you select the date that you're entering the update for. So you can say the 1st of June, and whether we are ending the contraceptive bout. So in this case, we are, because we're allowing her to breed. But you can also replace any contraceptives as well. So once the contraceptive has expired and you're reimplanting them, you just select replace contraception instead. So if we're allowing Sammy to have a breeding opportunity, we then say why the contraceptive bout was terminated. So that would be she was allowed to breed. And then this shows a whole host of different questions, and the list of questions that you'll see will vary depending on which options you select in these top 2 boxes. A really key piece of information that we'd like you to add when possible is whether any implants were removed, either when you're replacing contraception or when animals have a breeding opportunity, as we're really keen to understand how implant removal affects timed reversals. You can then add whether offspring was planned or unplanned, date of birth as well. This allows us to calculate how quickly an animal conceived after contraception, and also when they were given mate access. You can add whether there were unplanned pregnancies as well. So for example, if there was a birth control failure through this as well. And once you save the bout details, you should go back to the animal page. Again, it will take around 24 hours for that bout to then update. The other thing I'd like to take you all through is adding multiple boosters for injectable contraceptives. So these are things like your immunocontraception or things like Depo-Provera. So we'll go to Marshmallow, the Asiatic elephant, who was given Improvac in December 2017. We have updated the website so that instead of having to add all of this contraceptive information again, you can just add booster vaccinations at the bottom of that parent bout. So she was first contracepted on 21st of December 2017. We'd want to add that first booster vaccination 35 days later. She received 2.0012 grams of protein conjugate, and then we would add in the bout in 2018, just at the beginning of January. And then you have your booster record added there, and you can just continue to keep adding boosters for as long as that contraception is being applied. If you have a really long break, so beyond that recommended booster interval, we'd advise you to add in a new contraceptive record for that animal. As well, if there is a contraceptive failure, or if there's any big changes in how you're managing the animal, we'd advise you to complete this parent bout on the transfer completion page before adding any new parent bout. I believe those are the main things to do on our website in terms of adding data, or the biggest challenges that we've seen with data entry. So I will quickly pop back to our to the presentation, which I hope you can all see now. Just to go through how we actually use the data that you input. So firstly, I'd like to massively thank you all for taking the time to add your data. We now have over 45,000 records of contraceptive use in captive wildlife. This is shared in a database with the EAZA Reproductive Management Centre. And together we use all of this information to produce our contraceptive guidelines. So for every single field I have shown you, we have a corresponding field in our database. So normally when we are asked for, or we're asked for a recommendation, Zoo will send us an email with their question, and I will then access this access database. So as you can see, every column corresponds to either where the animal is, their animal ID, what contraceptive they were given, and any additional comments as well. I then go through this database. I also look through any historic information that we have and also published reports, and use that to produce this sort of summary guideline. And it's either in an Excel sheet, or if it's a shorter query, it will just be in like a normal email response. Each guideline, particularly if it's for a new species or if it's a very sort of specialist query, this will then be reviewed internally by the reproductive management group. So this is an opportunity for all of our working group advisors to provide their experience as well, and to ensure that all of the guidelines that we're providing you with are evidence-based and as up-to-date as possible. It normally takes about a week, and then we send it back to you. And that's basically everything. I'd really like to thank you all again for taking the time to attend this webinar. We have quite a bit of time for some extra questions as well. So if you do have any questions on Zoom, would you be able to put your hand up? That's if you go into the participants list. You should be able to put your hand up sort of close next to your name. And then if you do have any questions that you maybe don't want to ask here, or you have questions that come up later, please send us an email at contraception@chesterzoo.org. You know our website now, and then we have a Twitter feed, which is at EAZA_RMG. Thank you. Let's see, Ty had her hand up first.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. And just as Ronnie says, thank you to everybody who has entered data. Historically, it's been laborious, but Ronnie and the team have been marvelous at making it much easier, as you can see, to just add bouts, and the information that absolutely has to be added if you're in a rush is keyed red, as she said, as you saw, and other information, of course, we would like, but it does mean that at least you can quickly get bouts in there and get back to them, which is fab. I will just say, Ronnie, you may have said this right at the start, but that all your data is anonymized at all times. So no one will ever see or know that it's from your zoo except for Ronnie. She's the only one. Even if I need data, everything is sent completely anonymized to trawl, or if someone else is looking at putting a whole lot of information together, it's completely anonymized, and everyone has access to this. I mean, you can ask, you can say, look, I'm particularly interested in this, this, and this will be discussed with Ronnie, won't it, Ronnie? It'll potentially be a project, it potentially be something that, you know, we'll put together, but at no stage is the anonymity of the zoos at all compromised. So you don't have to worry that that data will be seen by anybody else except your institution in your particular, you know, when you log in. Is that right, Ronnie? So it's only you and the EAZA.
That's a really good point, and we do have so much data available. So if you are looking at doing a review on a certain species and would like access to the database, we can set up a project. So we have research proposal forms that then also get internally reviewed, and then we can share the data anonymized. And also we control the EAZA data, but if you are looking to do a global review as well, that research proposal can also get shared with the EAZA. They also review it and ensure that they're on board with sharing the data as well. Yeah, are there any other questions? Can't see. Oh, Alberto? Let me just...
Will you have this lecture available later on? I want to add a few keepers into the jersey just so they can add some of the husbandry behavior information. And I think it would be quite good for them just to go through this lecture.
Yes, of course. Sorry, I completely forgot to say that at the beginning as well. I've recorded this entire session as well, and I'll send out a link later this week with all the information. Of course, if there are any other questions as well, please just send me an email. Okay. Router? Yeah, can you hear me? Because my internet is dropping out every other minute. Yes, we can. Okay, good. I sent you an email already. I've put in all my actual and historical contraception data in the database, but a lot of data is missing to have decent data, because once I implant, it's up to the keepers to give me input and update on how the animal is behaving, if they're swelling, if the behavior changes. And I think I asked you for a kind of a checklist that I could give to my keepers so they could give me the information back so I can put it on the database. Yes, I am. That is still on my list of things. So just a kind of a tick list that reminds the keepers, check for swelling, check for aggression, check for this, check for that, so I can have the whole data to put in. So if you would have a checklist, that would be great. Yes, as I said, I am making that for you as well. And then we do have that animal care level of user access. So if they want to input data directly to the website, they can do that as well. But we would ask you for those permissions before we just sort of allow people to use the website. Okay, thank you. Alberto, do you have another question, or is your hand still up from your last question? No, I haven't been able to lower my hand. Okay, not a problem. Well, I can't see any more hands up. So I'd like to thank you all again for attending. I hope you're all safe and healthy, that your families and animals are all safe and healthy as well. And like I said, I will send you all a copy of this recording later this week. So thank you all very much for attending. Yeah, have a good day.